Wangchuk Shakabpa. I'm the board member of the US Tibet Committee. I'll be acting as the moderator. First, let me apologize about my voice, as I'm just getting over the flu, so I still have a little bit of a cough. We have three eminent speakers today. Each speaker will be given about 10 or 15 minutes to talk about the topic, which I should probably add is the succession of Dalai Lamas and the future of the succession method. Thank you. As most of you know, in September of 2007, the Chinese government published new rules and regulations concerning the appointment of what they call living Buddhas, or Rinpoches, reincarnations, in which basically only those reincarnations who are recognized or at least approved officially by the Chinese government are permitted to exist. And there are actually administrative and criminal penalties for those who violate this new rule. And then a few months later, while on a trip to Japan in November of 2007, His Holiness mentioned, quite surprisingly, that one of the possibilities for choosing the next Dalai Lama might be to choose the successor during the current Dalai Lama's lifetime, either that His Holiness would appoint the successor himself, or that perhaps really a council of senior-ranking Buddhist monks might elect their successor. And only a few days later after that, His Holiness also suggested that another possibility might be a referendum of Tibetans people over who the next successor would be, presumably after His Holiness had passed away, and presumably also if only the Tibetans in exile would be able to participate in such a referendum. So with that, I'm going to ask each of the speakers here to address this issue and talk about it, primarily obviously on what some of the implications might be, or how some of the methods that might be done in a new way of doing the normal succession method for the Dalai Lamas. Our first speaker is Professor Robert Thurman, who is also our host. Thank you very much, Professor Thurman. Professor Thurman is the president of Tibet House and the J. Tsongkhapa Professor of Indo-Tibetan Studies at Columbia University.
Thank you, Dilla. I didn't really realize I was going to make a formal statement. Hello, everybody. I thought we were going to have a discussion, so I didn't prepare a particular paper. But in fact, I consider the opening statement to be Jamyang Norbu's excellent jewel in the ballot box. He's getting very humorous at his not that old age, and I think that's a very funny one. That's like the opening. That's an interesting examination of the topic. Since the Chinese claimed at the time of the Panchen Lama reincarnation that they're going to recognize the reincarnations is when this nonsense started, I think, basically. And it's just such therefore it starts on the level of a propaganda farce, because they don't believe in reincarnation. They are dialectical materialists. They think it's some kind of superstition that they're going to manipulate of the Tibetans. So in a way, it can't really be taken seriously. And also, I believe Lama Zumbate, I think is what they say in Lhasa or anywhere about that Lama that the Chinese appointed. I don't think anyone takes him seriously. So I don't really consider that a kind of a danger. So the recent thing that they did, the best response to it, I think, was done by a gentleman in San Francisco, who I do not know personally, who is a performance artist, what they call. And he has been going regularly to the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. And he's saying that he's known all along that he's a reincarnation of some Lama, but the Tibetans will never recognize him. And so now he knows the real people to recognize him as the Chinese, so he wants to register. And they keep kicking him out. And then he tries to get the press to go and so on. I don't know who he is, and I don't know how successful his media campaign has been, but I think that's the best response in a way. Now, His Holiness's response, well, first of all, then there's another issue. About 6 years ago, Tibet House organized with the Norbu Linka in Dharamsala a conference where actually the three of us were all on the future sort of democracy, spirituality and democracy, I think was the title. And in that context, we had some conversations with His Holiness, and His Holiness did talk about how when they return to Tibet and the government, the democratic government, gets going, he is going to definitely retire, and he's going to see to it, and I believe he has it in the Constitution, that the Dalai Lama will hold no office whatsoever. And even earlier than that, I think in 1994, there was a publication of guidelines for a constitution, future constitution of Tibet, in which he said the Dalai Lama will hold no political responsibility. And on the other hand, he wants democracy, and I argued with him at the time that that was not a good idea. And anyway, the Tibetans would undoubtedly vote to keep him, at least in a symbolic role. I proposed the concept of a constitutional lamarchy. And he said, oh no, I don't want that. He said, I don't want to be a prisoner like Princess Di. He said, I'd be like a prisoner. He said, I don't want that. I want to be back in Jebom doing Dharma work. But then he said, of course, I'll mediate something if somebody wants something like that. So he has all along, even before the Chinese started this, been considering that Tibet must be a full-scale democracy, the eventual free Tibet that we all expect. And it must be a full democracy and therefore cannot be run by a person. And he also mentioned in that particular argument that we had that it wasn't fair that the Gelugpa guy is always the head Dalai Lama and all this, that's not fair. So he was definitely, this is like not a new idea of his. So now in this recent thing where there's no negotiation, the Chinese last 5-6 years of stalling tactics, which is all they've been doing, and this supposed talks that they deny they've been having, these stalling tactics are now obviously over. They have no credibility anymore. And so His Holiness is getting a little more feisty. He called for protests at the Olympics. He hopes people will protest. He's getting a little out there. And then the Chinese pulled this. So the Chinese attitude is, there is no Tibetan problem. We all know this. It's just the Dalai Lama's problem. And so they're going to get him out of the way because he's older and he's going to pass away. And then just to sort of seal that doubly, which I think is why they insisted on picking the Panchen Lama, even this is really preparing for that, to reassure Dalai before he died that this is what they would do. They will pretend to appoint a Dalai Lama. They just wanted to affirm that. So he's responding to that by saying, don't worry, if you guys insist on waiting until I go, then I will make some step with the Tibetan people where there will be a strong leadership continuing to keep this issue alive and being a symbolic focus, being a main spokesperson. I think that's really all he's saying. He's not necessarily, and of course, he has said from all along that democracy is it. So if the Tibetans vote, whatever they vote, Dalai Lama, no Dalai Lama, 5 Dalai Lamas, 3 Dalai Lamas, whatever. All poets should be Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama should be a poet. Whatever they vote for, that's what they should get. He feels. But so it's not made in the sense of when he says we could elect a Dalai Lama. That doesn't mean that he somehow will body snatch somebody who will be elected. He himself will continue to reincarnate as a religious teacher, I'm sure. And no one can question that, I think. He said for as long as space endures, in fact. So he will continue. But he means that the political institution of a spiritual, either symbolic or whatever kind of head of the government, will be changed and could be changed. And I was just thinking now, actually, the ideal thing, now the Tibetans, actually your dad wrote us an email, all of us, in preparation of this. I think he wants to be here. He's frustrated he can't be here. In which he said that anybody who was appointed by the Dalai Lama before he passed away would be just considered similar to a regent by the Tibetan people, because he wouldn't be the actual Bodhisattva's president. So there are other incarnations, and the Dalai Lama could appoint one of them. And particularly it would be good if that was an incarnation of Chanasig also, you know, because there are multiple, right? Ganla Gandu de la Detamba, we say, don't we? So there can be thousands of them, or many of them, right? So if the one that was appointed happened also to be a reincarnation of Chanasig, already acknowledges that, it would be very, very ideal. So I think the Dalai Lama is now I personally don't think that it will work out historically, that His Holiness will be gone before this issue is settled and the Tibet is free again. Personally, that's my personal opinion. It may be a minority opinion, but it is my opinion. And so I don't think this will all be necessary. But I think it's very excellent that His Holiness is showing, responding to the Chinese, that if they think they can wait for him to die and that will be the end of the Tibet issue, they have another thing coming and it will not be the end. Basically, which is what this is about. And so, as I said, but I just thought just now as we were chatting, that the great thing would be appoint someone who's already known to be a reincarnation, who's already registered, no, kidding, but who's already acknowledged by the Tibetan people to be a very important incarnation with a strong association with Avalokiteshvara, with Chanasing. That would be the best of both possible worlds. But I don't think it will happen. But anyway, if it did, that would be not a bad option.